We've been hearing for a while now that the middle class in America is basically extinct and has been wiped out, which turns out is actually true because nobody can really afford to have kids. People cannot afford to get married, or if they do get married, then they forfeit buying a house and forget about buying a brand new car unless you want to sink yourself into debt that you cannot pay for. Well, if these talking points resonate with you, you're definitely not alone, because these all used to be markers of the middle class lifestyle. Being able to get married, buy a house, have kids, and buy a new car were all commonplace 30 plus years ago when the middle class was alive and well. Instead, today, younger folks are stuck with rising costs, stagnant wages, and ever-increasing bills that they can't keep up with. So let's take a look at what happened to the middle class and why it's essentially gone these days. Well, if we look back into the World War II era, being middle class meant something like having a steady job, a home you could afford, and just one income while mom stayed home and took care of the kids, all while being able to buy a brand new car and the ability to raise a family without any financial constraints. And I think we could all agree that today's America looks nothing like that. Pew Research defines being middle class as earning anywhere between double to 2/3 of the median national income, depending on where you live. So the median national household income is about $80,000, $85,000. So in order to be middle class, you got to be earning at least $130,000 to $160,000 a year to sort of be middle class these days. And even though that definition really hasn't changed, the amount of people who fit into that category definitely has, as wages just haven't kept up with inflation. Like, for example, back in 1971, 61% of Americans were part of the middle class. And fast forward to 2023, that number has dropped to 51%, which I would say it probably is actually a lot lower than that. I don't even believe that it's 51%. I would say it's probably more like 20%. Because you got to remember that these numbers come from people taking a survey. And they'll ask people, do you consider yourself middle class? And they'll say yes or no, but their definition of what middle class is might be totally different from the real definition. Most people who claim to be middle class certainly don't make 2/3 to double the median national income. And it's not really a big surprise that the cost of living is the main culprit of why the middle class has essentially gone extinct. The median U.S. single-family home has nearly tripled in price between 2012 and 2025, jumping from $164,000 to $460,000. The typical cost of raising a child has increased 2.5-fold, rising from $165,000 in 2000 to a whopping $414,000. You need to have almost $500,000 to raise a kid from start to finish these days. But wages have only gone up 2.1 times what it was back in the early 2000s, from $29,744 to about $62,172 as of June of 2025. But no doubt where you live plays a gigantic role in whether or not you are middle class. Like, obviously where I'm walking through here in the hills of Tiburon, where all of these houses that I'm surrounded by here are anywhere between $5 and $12 million for the most part, that is well beyond middle class for any area, even including this area. This is just straight up rich right here. And that's why, funny enough, because the middle class highly depends on where you live, oftentimes I get comments from people saying, hey, Michael, why don't you just walk through some normal middle class neighborhoods? Like, well, it's because of where I live. They don't really exist that much anywhere where I live. When I come here to California, there are no middle class neighborhoods around here. I have to drive far away to get there. Same thing in Miami. Living in Miami Beach, there are no middle class neighborhoods except for just the regular 2-floor apartment buildings that I walk by sometimes over there. Other than that, that's it. Those are the middle class neighborhoods. Versus if you live in the Midwest, much of the Midwest is still one big middle class neighborhood, for example. I mean, you got a 6-figure salary out here in California or in Miami where I live, that's just enough to cover the basics. Whereas if you have that 6-figure salary somewhere in the Midwest, if you're living in Kentucky, Iowa, Illinois, or Indiana, somewhere like that, that 6 figures is going to allow you to have a pretty lavish lifestyle over there. And let's face it, because of inflation, even if people were still earning a healthy salary these days, let's say, the median household income was in the six figures, the reality is having a six-figure income in 2025 is not what it was in the year 2000. And this affects how people feel about their standard of living. When you have to pay more for groceries, utilities, rent, mortgage, insurance, all kinds of things like that, your standard of living goes down. Because even though you might be able to afford it, you won't have a whole lot of money left over for all of the discretionary spending in order to make life feel good. Because even a lot of households that actually technically qualify for being middle class income-wise, they still struggle with debt and housing costs. And part of it's their fault, to be clear. People like to keep up with the Joneses. And, if you're making $160,000 a year, there is no real excuse of why you should be having debt issues or housing cost issues. The only excuse is that you are living beyond your means. You are making $160 a year, trying to live like you make $250 a year is most likely what's going on there. It's just like me, guys. Like, I'm walking through these neighborhoods over here. I can't afford these $5 or $10 million houses, but I can afford to stay here for a few months and walk past them. That's cheap, Moving into the neighborhood and buying this house is not. So really, the only people who are living the middle class lifestyle these days are people that are making significantly more money than the average family, or people who are kind of spending beyond their means and pretending to make that money. That's why I don't believe that 51% of households are considered middle class these days. I think it's much, much lower than that. There's a lot of people who pretend and like to think that they are middle class, but the reality is a much different picture. But if you're not middle class right now and you want to have any shot at becoming middle class in the future, there's a couple things you have to do. Number one, you really have to be budgeting in order to make that happen. You need to be saving money to advance yourself up the ladder. At the same time, you got to create more than one stream of income, most likely, and increase the income flow of those sources of income. You also need to eliminate any and all debts that you possibly can. And something else that is huge is you really need to avoid lifestyle inflation. That's going to help you become middle class and ultimately live the middle class lifestyle. Like, you're not ready to buy the $400,000 house until you have the income to back it up and you've been able to save the down payment. You don't have any more student loan debt. You don't have any more credit card debt or anything else holding you back. If you need the bank of mom and dad to be able to buy that $400K house because you still got a $80,000 student loan balance, you're not ready. You're faking it. You are living a lifestyle beyond what you can technically afford. And by the way, something I want to mention that I am doing now is recently I have hired an assistant who has been very helpful, and she has been helping me put together a lot of different things that are going to be coming forward on the channel. And one of the most recent additions is a weekly newsletter that I have started. And I'm giving you guys like one little nugget of wisdom each week that was either in one of my videos or something that you might have missed. So if you want to sign up for my weekly newsletter, for now, it's just once a week. I'm not going to be spamming you guys daily or anything like that. And I have a link down in the description below if you want to sign up for that. And of course, it's free.